an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Grace of Kings, chapters 26, 27, and 28, brought to you by Kyle. In these chapters, it is hard to express how crazy town banana pants these chapters are, but unexpected is too timid a word. Nothing is going the way that I thought it was going to go. Not even a little bit, and I would like to register my smugness regarding the fate of the chatelain, because it's pretty much what I would expect. He didn't. Spoilers. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, yeah, I said these are just, like, so crazy, and Kyle's is like, aren't they? Oh, my God. You guys, where to start? I mean, really, you have to start with the basically, like, narwhals that they ride to fucking... I mean, just... It's so crazy. I thought that, like, the other shit that was going down was already pretty nuts. And then we get to that, and I'm like, excuse me? This is just so delightful. I'm going to pull back here and start talking about this from the beginning. So we begin with King Thufi. I kind of heart King Thufi, I have to say. As much as, like, he can be a little bit of a shit, he is so frustrated with everybody that I fucking understand it so deeply in my soul. There is something about other people's pettiness and incompetence and failure to see the big picture or prioritize what's really something we should be, like, concerned about now versus later, that brings out the worst in someone who is good at doing those things. It's sort of like to make this a very, like, a microcosmic example, I get enraged by people in the grocery store who have their cart on one side of the aisle while they stretch across to look at something at the other side of the aisle and thus block the whole fucking aisle with no awareness of the 7 people waiting to get by them, because they are so self-centered and absorbed that they aren't even aware any other people exist in the store with them. And it's such an easy thing to me to make myself smaller, to get out of the way, to make it more convenient for other people to continue to do what they need to do while I do what I need to do. That the fact that other people, it doesn't ever even occur to them, makes me blind with rage, which is part of why I now do groceries via pickup service, because I can't handle being in stores. I just have discovered that those situations are where my self-control and, like, and feeling of fellowship with the human race goes right out the window, is being in crowds. Kyle says, or people who walk like turtles in the middle of Costco aisles. Yo, these aisles are wide enough for 2 people if you stay to your fucking side. Why can't people just treat aisles like we treat roads? You stay to the right. If you need something on the left, you dart across, you grab it, you go back to the right. If somebody needs to go around you, they go into the left for a second and then they go back to the right. It's not that hard, people, but I get so mad about it. And this is where I think King Thufi is that he's just like, this shouldn't be this difficult, and you assholes fucking can't put down your little squabbles and shit for a second to look at the big picture. So finally he just says, I'm nominating myself as princeps. The room fell into a stunned silence. There had not been a princeps for hundreds of years. But no one objected, at least not openly. Kokru, after all, had the largest army, and it was the only Tiro state to have won any victories in the field against the Empire. Marana and Naman are throwing everything they have into an assault on Wolf's Paw, and we have to put aside our differences and do everything we can to help Gon. Fasa and Kakru will send every man who can be spared, and the rest of you must do what you can to help. money, weapons, intelligence. The 6 states will make a collective stand at Wolf's Paw. In truth, this wasn't a mere platitude. All the Tiro states could help. The remnants of Rima's army had made their way into Kakru, bitter men who longed for vengeance. A few Amu ships had escaped from the Battle of Amu Strait and limped their way back to Karusa, along with King Ponadomu and Princess Kikomi, though it was too bad that the airship they escaped in had mysteriously sprung a leak shortly after landing and had to be scuttled. And I was reading that, and of course I don't understand what was going on with Kikomi yet, and I'm like, mysteriously sprung a leak. It was too bad. Why would it do that? I'm still not picking up on what's happening here. Should we fail at Wolf's Paw, then the islands of Dara will again sink back into barbarism and tyranny. But if we succeed, we will have extinguished the Empire's last glimmer of hope. Kindo Morana will not be able to find more men willing to die for the Empire in Rui and Dasu. The people of Zana have suffered almost as much as we have. We will rise or sink together as one. Should we succeed, we will push on through the fields of Gajira, through Thako Pass, and bring the war to the Emperor in his palace in Pan. As princeps, I decree now that whosoever, be he churl or earl, captures Emperor Irishi will be made the king of a new Tiro state encompassing the richest parts of Jafika. I love this. King Ponadomu muttered that the princeps was making promises with land that by right belonged to Amu, but considering he and Princess Kikomi were living on the handouts from King Thufi, he kept his voice very low. Yeah, bitch, you better. Listen. Beggars can't be choosers. We all respect that you came out of a bad situation, and we're delighted that you, found refuge and are alive, but also you haven't got a leg to stand on, and you're just going to need to sit the fuck down. So then we go to Gia and Mata and Kuni, and it is kind of adorable. Mata is really enjoying being a father. He actually probably has gotten Gia pregnant again already, which, damn, y'all. And I like that Mata is really sort of impressed with, how much this life that's so simple is appealing to him. He is such a warlike young man who was brought up with a lot of anger and a desire for blood and vengeance. And I think that he just... Kuni has the kid, not Mata. Oh, yeah, thank you. But Mata is sort of admiring the peacefulness of this life. And I just didn't expect that from him. I kind of thought he was going to see it... I don't want to say that he would be derisive about it, because that's too harsh, but more like he would be like, well, I'm glad you're happy, Kuni, but I don't really get who wants to live like this. There's no glory in this. There's no excitement here. But it turns out that Mata's actually sort of you'll have this house that's not that luxurious, but it's still, there's something about being here that's really comforting and nice. And it makes me because I think that what I thought Mata's reaction would be, which is just why would anybody want this, was not giving him due credit. I think I see him as being more foolish than he is. But the truth is that he just hasn't been given a chance to see more of the world yet. It's not that he is incapable of appreciating more than what he has been presented with. It's just that he hasn't been given the chance. So the fact that he is able to adjust his brain to understand the appeal of just a simple life with a wife and children it's kind of revealing a lot about his character having more depth than I expected. So, King of Jafika, Kuni marveled. That is certainly going to excite the officers and soldiers. Indeed it will. My brother, how can you remain so calm? Surely you see it as a promise meant for you to fulfill. Mata grinned. There are many heroes in the rebellion. Who can say whom the gods will favor with such a prize? Kuni shook his head. You do not need to be so humble. Strive for your destiny. Mata laughed, happy at Kuni's confidence, but also feeling embarrassed. Right now, I just hope King Thufi will make me commander-in-chief of the alliance forces at Wolf's Paw so that my uncle can stay in Karusa. He deserves a rest, and King Thufi would feel safer with the marshal around in charge of homeland defense. Can we take a pause here and revisit this sentence? Right now, I just hope King Thufi will make me commander-in-chief of the Alliance forces at Wolf's Paw so that my uncle can stay in Carusa. He deserves a rest. He wants to go. But later on, when a certain princess is added into the equation, the fact that he's being sent off to Wolf's Paw he sees as like full of ulterior motives and the wrong decision, which obviously we know is a little bit full of ulterior motives because, as it turns out, his uncle is not without his own agenda. But this is what he had wanted, and he's getting exactly what he claimed to want, and yet, how circumstances changed. So anyway, this is when we go into Kikomi's POV. First, we start off with Mata visiting with Kikomi and falling in love with her. And everybody sees the two of them together and thinks what a striking couple they make, because they both look like gods in their own way. He looks like a god of war. She like, a goddess of beauty and fertility. And Mata is just absolutely enthralled with her in a way that he never thought would happen with a woman. Like, he's just kind of always expected that sort of thing to be in songs. And then here he is feeling this way about somebody and is like, this is not supposed to happen to me. Which, have we all been in that position, or what? Put me down for, or what? Like, good God. There is nothing quite like the moment when love hits you in a very inconvenient moment and you're like, this is not supposed to be what happens right now. What the fuck? Then came the rebellion, and overnight she came to live the life she had only encountered in fairy tales. Ministers bowed before her, men with lowered eyes carried her into the palace at Muning, and all the old rituals and ceremonies became real again. An invisible wall rose up around her. Being Princess Kikomi was a great privilege, but it was also a great burden. And Mata just really gets what this is like for her, and the fact that she was born noble, but she didn't get the birthright that she was entitled to. And, just he appreciates her as a fucking person. He appreciates her point of view, her abilities. She's beautiful and smells good, sure, but that's like not all it is. And he is not aware at this point that his uncle is also very into her. Kikomi stood up from deep Jiri and watched as Mata's figure disappeared down the hall. She closed the door and leaned against it, her face falling into an expression of deep grief. She mourned her freedom, mourned the loss of herself. How foolish of Captain Kanotho to think that his bravery had engineered her and King Ponodomu's miraculous escape. I made a deal. Oh man, I thought that miraculous escape seemed awfully easy, but I just sort of let it be because, sometimes things work out, and in books especially, you do have to make allowances for things that seem a little bit out of the realm of reality. And so I just was willing to put it down as well, shit just went really right. Nope, not true. This whole thing was engineered so as to make it easy for her to betray these people, to put her in a position where she arrives as if she is a penniless refugee, but beautiful and in need of protection and assistance, and then she can fuck shit up from the inside. Because Kindo Marana is a smart motherfucker. Oh man, this guy... Kindo, listen, everybody underestimates your ass. You are too good. Everybody underestimated your ass, I should say. Now everybody seems to get it. But Jesus Christ, I just was so taken aback by this, and it's really smart and quite a little twist. So here comes, again, with Ken Liu. Oh, this guy. I need to read this. It's so Ken Liu gets it, man. He gets it in a way that many men do not. Let me just read this. Finn Zindu had always thought of women as diversions. Blah, 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 blah. But this woman was different. She was strong, like a young jujube tree. Though he commanded 20,000 men, and even King Thufi deferred to him on all military matters, she was not cowed by him. She did not ask for his protection, the way so many women seemed to. This only made him feel even more protective of her. She spoke of her admiration of him and of her sorrow at the sacrifices made by the young men of Aruluji. So many noblewomen in Finn's experience were silly creatures, their minds confined to the walls of their boudoirs and the schedule of balls and parties. But the princess cried genuine tears for the men who died, each alone in the dark waters of the Almu Strait. She understood what moved men who went to the battlefield to seek glory, but whose dying thoughts always turned to mothers and wives, daughters and sisters. She was worthy indeed of the men who died for her, and she was beautiful. So beautiful. So I'm reading this and I'm like, is he not liking other girlsing Kikomi? Is that what he's doing? Because any woman listening to this podcast who has dated in her life and is either, straight or bi, who has dated men ever in her life, has run across this. The guy who's like, wow, you're not like most girls. Fill in the blank with whatever bullshit he thinks most girls think or do that is summarily untrue, that he finds you to be so unusual for not falling into that fucking stereotype. It's the kind of thing that I used to low key, like I would take it on the surface as the compliment that it was intended to be, but it did bother me and I never was really able to put my finger on why. And then as I got older, I started to understand, they're being like, you're so much different than other girls, is them being like, I don't respect most women, but you deserve it, which is really fucking gross. And that's what's happening here. And then we go right from that into Kikomi, and it's so good. The marshal simply assumed she wanted and needed to be protected, had been surprised to hear her speak of Amu's naval defeat with knowledge and sense. She noted how Finn had condescendingly praised her education, had chuckled when she expressed wonder at Karuza's library. He had not paid much attention when she spoke of the suffering and hardship of the women who worked the docks of Muning Tozu to prepare the ships for war. But his eyes had lit up when she turned the conversation to the sailors on those ships. He had truly meant to pay her a compliment when he told her how different she was from, quote, those silly young noblewomen, had truly believed that she would be flattered to be thought extraordinary from her sex. It was men like him who had made her into a symbol, had put her into this impossible position. But in a way that made her task easy. She knew exactly what she needed to say and do. And she even enjoyed the challenge of playing the role of his ideal. She was worthy only insofar as she oriented herself to men, like a sunflower adoring the sun. Bitch! What? That is the realest shit. Oh my God. That's the sort of thing that you read in like op-eds written by women who are sick of the bullshit. And for this to be in a fantasy novel written by a man is just beautiful and unexpected and just some groundbreaking shit. I loved it so deeply and again was so caught off guard by it. Oh, it's so great. It makes me so happy. This bitch is just like, oh my God, you are so easy to manipulate because you just have not got any estimation of women at all. You don't expect anything from us. And so I could do whatever and you aren't expecting it because you think we're fucking idiots. And the fact that I display any interest at all and any intelligence at all is just like, unless it's directed at you, doesn't even like show up. It doesn't even like fall on your radar. It's outside of the realm. She talks about the hardships of women and he doesn't even fucking hear her. But the instant it's about men, oh, now, girl, that is some shit, man. I loved this. It's so true. Oh, I can't. Okay, so Mata starts to realize that some shit's going down with Finn. I feel so bad for Mata. He's just really like, he hasn't made his official request for her hand. And now he's realizing like that he kind of can't, that there's something going on between them two and that he is not going to get his chance. Finn, meanwhile, is saying to himself like, well, she's like so much younger than me, but also she appreciates my maturity. She wants a strong, manly man. And I'm like, dude, you don't think Mata's a strong, manly man? Get out of here. She wanted a love more manly, more lasting and real. Mata was young and impulsive, infatuated like a puppy. Mata asked Kuni to come and visit. Morose and dejected, Mata said nothing as he filled 2 cups with sorghum liquor. He's sending me away. He's decided that Pashiroma, that decrepit old man, fit only to sit by the gates of Karuza, will be commander-in-chief at Wolf's Paw. Oh, so he's sending him away, not to Wolf's Paw, because that's what I thought that he had done, but I got this wrong. I'm in charge of the rear guard only, and I must leave within the week to begin preparations for the crossing over, but I won't even get to cross with the main force. She said she would not choose between us, and so he decided to make the choice for her and get me out of the way. He's taken away my chance for glory. And Mata gets real drunk and almost tries to like punch Kuni when Kuni's like, she's playing the two of you and isn't worthy of this. And he just gets really mad about it and tries to punch him, but he's so drunk that he just like falls over. And he says that he's going to go with Mata and keep him company. But he winds up finding out that his mother died and having to go home in order to go into mourning. Gia, meanwhile, is pregnant again and decides to remain in Karusa because traveling is too dangerous. And they make Otho Kryn the steward of the household so that it's not improper for him to stay in the house alone with Gia. So he's going to be like, you know, he goes from sort of being like a right-hand guy to a servant, which is, it feels like insulting to Kuni, but he really appreciates it and he agrees to it. And tells Otho that Kuni tells Otho that he's like really honored by his loyalty. Meanwhile, we all know that Otho's like mad in love with Lady Gia. I'm worried about where that's going because I feel like Otho might do something stupid, but I'm hoping that it just results in him being so devoted to her that he keeps her safe. Because I just don't want anything to happen to her, frankly. Otho's so young and dumb. Bless his heart. And Kuni thanked him and began to prepare for the trip home. Be careful, brother. Focus on our only concern, defeating the Empire. But Mata said nothing. His eyes seemed very far away. So then we have a moment where this Defiro and Rotho, the two commoners / soldiers, are separated from each other, and we find out later that this was a god that came to them and split them up just for like the interest of it, just to see what would happen when they're split apart, which is really fascinating. And Defiro is so much more cynical than Rotho that I can't help but wonder where this is going, because Defiro's adventure is substantial and he is up to it. Defiro handles it all with an admirable open-mindedness and excitement and respect for what he is meant to be doing, while also being very practical about it all, that I really respect. I enjoy Defiro a lot. And yeah, the two of them being split up from each other, I was surprised that this happened, but it turns into something pretty interesting. And he tells him, take care of yourself. Don't always rush to be at the front. Stay back and watch carefully. If things aren't going well, run. I mean, that's some good advice. So, Finn told himself that he did it to protect both Mata and Kikomi. Mata had been behaving more and more erratically, and Kikomi had been frightened by what Mata might do if she rejected him outright. Yeah, she was so scared. So then we go to her moment where we find out exactly what was going on. You will practice your womanly arts on the Zindus. Finn and Mata Zindu are the heart and soul of Castle Kakru's martial might, but you will divide an uncle and nephew from each other with your feigned affections until jealousy and suspicion have paralyzed the Kakru army. And when the time is right, you will assassinate one of the two. With either of Kakru's 2 arms gone, Naman and I will make short work of the other. This is my offer, your royal highness. Dedicate yourself to this task, or the people of Amu will pay the price for your failure. Yo, I can't with Kindo. Like, he knows people, man. The fact that he realizes that she'd be able to, like, split the 2 of them apart and turn them against each other, I don't feel like Kindo should be that aware, but apparently. And what she has to do the deed is a friggin' knife that's made out of, like, horn, because they have these awesome, essentially metal detectors that are giant magnets that will pull any hidden weapon out of your clothing. And so she's using something that's made of bone and pearl that won't be pulled out, which is, like, really neat that they have these little metal detectors. What a cool idea. I love this. She had thought long and hard. Marana thought she was a peacock's feather, thought she was a drop of poison from the horned toad's sack. Yet she had a choice. Narrow and confined though it was, she would make the most of it. She had thought long and hard. Mata was younger, but he was on the rise, just coming into full awareness of his own potential. Finn, on the other hand, was past his prime. If she killed Mata, Finn might be accelerated on his arc of long and inevitable decline. But if she killed Finn, hot-blooded Mata might be so filled with rage and thoughts of vengeance that the Empire would be forced to face the monster it had created. She's smarty. So she kills him, but he breaks her wrists as she does so. I didn't really know if she would straight up go through with it, but she does. And she had intended to kill herself when she killed him. But because he breaks her wrists, she can't do it. And she's sitting there afterwards, like, covered in blood and really, trying to make the best of the situation, figure out what she should do. And Marana had promised that she would be remembered in the hearts of the people of Amu, that generation after generation would sing songs about her sacrifice and tell stories about her heroism. Did she deserve such praise? Yes, she had saved the people of Amu. But she had also cut down the Marshal of Kakru in cold blood and endangered the rebellion and the lives of countless others. She did not exactly regret it. Yet how could she bear to face Finn Zindu and all those who were about to die under the sword of Marana in the afterlife? She must steel her heart for the accusing stares, which is such a crazy thought. She shuddered as she finally understood the deviousness of Marana's plan. If Zana were to spare Amu in the subsequent wars and her name were then celebrated, Kakru would suspect an alliance between Amu and Zana and consider her act proof of Amu's treachery. Muning, that beautiful, fragile, floating city, might yet be put to the torch by Mata's army. She thinks of this, and it never even occurred to me, and she is so right, 100%. Yeah, because they're going to be like, well, you guys did us a good turn, so I guess we're going to pay it back. And somebody else is going to notice and be like, oh, really? Paying it back. That's interesting. What alliance did you two have? Marana was counting on her vanity, on her desire to be a great hero to her people, to be remembered for her sacrifice. But her glory would bring endless strife between Kakru and Amu and doom the beautiful island. There was only one way to thwart his plan. She would have to desecrate her own memory to ensure the safety of Amu. So what she does is yell for the guards, I would rather be your slave girl than the princess of Amu, Marana, my Marana. I have done this for you out of love. That's a fucking moment. Like, yikes. That's rough. She continued to shout until they silenced her with their swords. So she sacrifices herself rather than be the hero to her land, because she knows that being their hero will result ultimately in their being defeated and enslaved or simply killed, which is just, she's fucking thinking shit through, man. She's good. I'm so bummed that she's dead. That sucks. Ugh. But she had quite an awesome arc, and it was just very satisfying. And we go to a little blurb right at the end of that. I'm truly sorry, little sister. Though the Mingen falcons occasionally flew to every island of Dara, from that day on, they never approached Aruluji, the home of Tututika, last born of the gods. I am wondering, what does that mean? I'm truly sorry, little sister. Like, why aren't they going there? I'm not really sure the significance of that moment. I don't feel like I understand the mythology of this land well enough to know what that means. Yeah, I'm just curious about that. And Kyle, if you know, let me know. If somebody listening has got an idea on this, let me know. So then we come to the last chapter in this section. Chapter 28, Luanzia's plan. Luanzia. Zudi, the 10th month in the 4th year of the reign of righteous force. Kyle is responding because Kiji's guy was Kindo and Tutu's girl was Kikomi, and his guy got her killed. Ah, that's interesting. And so the fact that the falcons don't come anymore is Kiji's like being like keeping his symbol away from the land of the goddess that he kind of insulted and fucked up with. Basically, right? Like sort of leaving her territory alone. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. Okay, so thank you, Kyle. Okay, so chapter 28. Luanzia. Luanzia is so nuts. What a crazy story he has. I had completely forgotten about it, to be fair, about how he like got given this book that gives him information and like writes itself before his eyes. I had totally forgotten all about that. But he is heading to visit Kuni because Kuni is still in mourning for his mother. And I love that he like tries this big flowery speech with Kuni, who just responds with, I've been a great disappointment to my mother, but she loved me no matter what, which just, you know, is just so Kuni. And he responds, Luan responds, I've often thought the pleasure that parents take in their children is like the pleasure a man gets from releasing a wild bird. I would venture to guess that Lady Garou had plenty of joy, though she had seen but a little of how high you could fly. Which is a really beautiful sentiment, and that's something that I think is part of what would be part of why I don't feel I'm cut out for parenthood. I'm such a control freak, and I just would ruin a kid's life. And like your ability to be a good parent is your ability to let go and let your child make their own decisions and fuck up and learn from their fuck ups and trust that you have raised them with enough sense that they're going to be able to make it even when they make mistakes. And I don't know that I could do that. And that you have to like, you know, be okay with them making a life for themselves that you don't get to see all of anymore, you know? And that's tough, man. So, Luanzia had been in Han on a secret mission to rouse up hot-blooded young men who would be willing to risk their lives and perform acts of sabotage in the Imperial Heartland. It was dangerous work that held little promise, but Luan took to it without complaint. When a man loved his homeland enough, even the slimmest hope was worth pursuing, contrary to prudent calculation and careful forethought. But one night he was awakened by the sound of paper rustling. As he sat up, he saw in the starlight that the pages of Gitre Uthu, the tome given to him by that old fisherman by the sea, fluttered by themselves on his desk. He got up from his bed, sat down next to the desk, and saw that the book had opened itself to a new section he had never seen before. Slowly, the blank pages were being filled with a new landscape of words and pictures. There was a map of the islands of Dara, filled with tiny black and white symbols that he recognized as representing the armies that the Empire and the Rebellion respectively commanded. Below the map was the beginning of what appeared to be a long treatise. He read. The sun rose and set and rose again. He continued to read, forgetting hunger and thirst. 3 days later, he got up, closed the book, and laughed. The book had simply shown him what he had learned in his years of travel. It was as if his mind had been poured out into the pages, but systemized, made orderly, and presented in one place. And the new way of seeing what he already knew gave him a new idea. All his life, he realized, had been a prologue to this moment. It was time to fulfill his promise to his father. So basically, the book's acting like a pensieve. Or a pensive, however you pronounce the Harry Potter piece of equipment, where it takes your thoughts and sifts them for you so that you get the most important relevant pieces put together in an order and system that makes sense and connects new ideas or makes connections that you hadn't quite made yourself. Things like this, which is pretty cool. He goes to a few people to try and present this idea, which we still don't know what it is quite yet as readers. King Kasugi. And he's like, yeah, no, that's a young man's game. I don't think so. He goes to Mata Zindu, but the general, still brooding over the deaths of his uncle and Princess Kikomi, turned away all visitors, and Luen never even got to speak to Mata. Kuni-Garu was his last hope. Garu was no great warrior, and he was born only a commoner, but Luanzia had felt something stirring in the depths of a man's heart, a willingness to be persuaded and to gamble. So, here comes the fucking plan. Basically, this is so insane. What they want to do is just go straight to the fucking palace and capture the Emperor Irishi right out of the gate. Just do it. And how they mean to do this is to ride a bunch of, I keep wanting to call them narwhals. Narwhals don't have scales, but close enough. And essentially, because nobody has ever been seen doing this, put the fear of God in the opposing forces. Not only does this wind up with them getting the Emperor, but they also are able to take control of the airship fleet, which is enormous. What? That's such a big deal. I'm jumping so far ahead here, but what does Lutho think of your plan? My father was chief augur to Lutho, and I have a bit of a reputation as a master of divination. But the truth, Lord Guru, is that the will of the gods cannot be ascertained. I've never witnessed a sign that cannot be interpreted multiple ways. I've always believed that the gods are like the wind and the tides, currents of great power that may be ridden only by those willing to help themselves. It's a common sentiment among those who have studied long in Han. It isn't by coincidence that Jimpen schools, though small, have produced a disproportionate number of Dara's mathematicians, philosophers, lawgivers. We strive to calculate that which is knowable in favor of that which is not. And Kuni is basically like, well, I'm glad at least that you said that the god wasn't totally in favor of your plan, because I would have known that you were full of shit. And then says half of the criminals and gamblers who make their life by basically being con men pray to Lutho, and the other half to Tazu, because Lutho favors game and skill, but Tazu is the god of chance, essentially. Believing the world is as random as the path of his whirlpool, and the future as likely to delight as to disappoint. Which seems, unfortunately, to be much more the truth to me. So, by the time Luen was done with his explanations, he looked at the pile of paper scraps in front of him in despair. His plan seemed preposterous, an impossible dream. The odds of success were so slim as to be non-existent. By forcing Luen to explain himself, Kuni had succeeded in showing him that the plan was impossible. I'm sorry to have wasted your time, said Luen, and began to pack up. Even in games of skill, said Kuni, there is no guarantee of winning. In the end, there's always a gap that can't be bridged by knowledge. Once you've worked out all the odds, you still have to toss the dice and take that leap of faith. I love Kuni so much. I've always promised myself an interesting adventure, Kuni said. There should be a little bit of Tazu in everyone's life. Then he went to say goodbye to the spirit of his mother and to apologize for having to leave early. So this is when they head out to the fucking guys, the cannibal, quote-unquote, islands. And DeFiro is... I love this. First of all, DeFiro's just getting sent out here, and he's just like, oh, that's weird. I wonder where we're going. But there's this paragraph that I really liked. His life was about being fed, being paid, and being bored for long stretches, interspersed with brief flashes of terror and extraordinary exertion. War was not good for anyone except those in charge. Which, like, that seems like the realest thing. Still, if one had to be a soldier, Duke Garu was a good lord to follow. He really seemed to make it a point not to risk his men's lives unnecessarily, and DeFiro thought this made him a better man than General Zindu. Rat was obsessed with Zindu's arrogant bravery and his deeds of valor, but DeFiro could see that Zindu didn't really care about death. He wasn't afraid of anything, and that was not a virtue as far as DeFiro was concerned. Amen, DeFiro. I can admire that in an abstract way, but when it comes right down to it, I feel like that attitude is not going to get you anywhere good. So yeah, he's just along for the ride, like, well, let's see where this winds up. And then they wind up at the Cannibal Islands, and everybody's like, what is this about, though? Why are we here? Because everybody has this idea of what these people are like. And this was part of where I was like a little concerned, because it would be very easy for these two groups of people to not see eye to eye and trust each other at all. But it turns out that everybody is willing to like trust in some ways, just when it comes right down to it, in Kuni and his judgment in bringing them here, but also to trust in the other people and like not be like, well, I've always heard that they were cannibals, so obviously it doesn't seem to occur to any of them that they aren't eating any people the whole time they're there. I don't know if they think, well, these cannibals are just being polite and eating fish while we're here, and they're going to go back to eating each other when we're gone. But whatever the case, they managed to wind up like being friends. And I like this so much that there's this kind of almost party atmosphere the first couple of nights that they're there, while the chief and Kuni and Lewin all like sit down and have their little powwow. And there's like a wrestling match that everybody's betting on, and DeFiro like places his bet and he winds up winning, but he feels a little bad that he won off of this guy who is one of the cannibals, and I keep using quotes around that, and gives him some money in exchange for it, which is very polite and like, it's just a nice thought. DeFiro tried to get him to explain his tattoos, which the man proceeded to do by drawing on the ground. Ah, it's all about women, DeFiro thought as he puzzled over Huluwen's drawings. He took a stick and began to draw a female figure on the ground, exaggerating the breasts and butt. Shocker. The other men gathered round to appreciate DeFiro's artistry, and he basked in the Adwin's admiring looks. For a bunch of cannibals, they aren't too bad. Oh, DeFiro, you're pretty fun. DeFiro suddenly remembered his artwork and was relieved to find that Huluwen had already discreetly wiped all traces of it away. The two looked at each other and laughed. He does this after he notices a bunch of women who are coming out. There was baked wild taro. There were boars wrapped in banana leaves and roasted underground with heated stones. There were wild bird eggs and meat from sharks and whales. Little spice was used, except sea salt, but the food was fresh and strange and very delicious, and everyone drank plenty of arak. So Moonkakri goes up to DeFiro and is just like, yeah, you can swim, right? We're going to be doing something later, and I need you to be looking after Kuni, calls him Duke Garu, because he can't swim, and some shit that is going to be a little bit dangerous for him is going to go down. Are we setting out to sea? Moon nodded, a happy twinkle in his eye. After tomorrow, you're going to have some real stories to tell, which DeFiro does not appreciate exactly how serious of a statement that is until later. So then we have the moment where Kuni has to convince Chief Kaizen of his intentions. And Chief Kaizen is basically like, I'll help you in exchange for you promising that nobody will come to our islands again. And Kuni's straight up honest with him and is like, I can't promise that. I can tell you that I will tell everyone else not to come here. I can tell you that I'll persuade them to tell their own people this isn't allowed. But there's not, he doesn't say this, but the implication is there's not like an electrified fence around these islands. People are going to be curious, and it's going to be a place that's like shrouded in mystery, and they're going to want to come here. And unless I put everybody in prison who attempts it, it's going to continue to happen. Then you're saying your word is worthless and it's useless to talk to you. Chief Kaizen, it would be easy for me to lie and tell you what you want to hear, but I won't do that. Can you swear that no boy in your land ever wondered what it might be like to live as one of the men of Dara? To dress in fine clothes, to eat from porcelain dishes, to court women who look like no others they had seen? Can you swear no girl in your land ever thought about what it must be like to live as one of the women of Dara? To wear silk and dyed cotton, to sing and write poetry, to be married to men who are of another race and another country? There is no such foolishness in the hearts of our children. Then you do not know young people at all, Chief Kaizen. The young often want that which the old detest and fear. The yearning for the new, for something different glimpsed but faintly through legends and shadows, cannot be taken from them, not unless you freeze their hearts and imprison their minds. Yet you say you wish Tanadu to remain free. I cannot stop traders from stopping by your shores. They'll always risk anything for more profit. I cannot stop men from setting sail for your land if they believe that just going somewhere no other men of Dara have been to is reward enough. I cannot stop men from coming here and preaching if they believe they have a duty to tell you what they think is right and just and to teach you a better way of life. But I can promise that if I become one of the big chiefs, I will not permit my people to come here and perform these acts accompanied by the accoutrements of war, and I will do my utmost to urge the other big chiefs to follow my example. If men of Dara come here, they will come to persuade, not to coerce, and so long as you do these visitors no injury, no army or navy of Dara will intercede on their behalf. Now, the chief is kind of like, you don't need instruments of war to fuck up a way of life. Like, there's no reason that they can't do just as much damage by persuasion as they could do with weapons. But Kuni points out, well, that's something that you have to risk. If you love the freedom of your people as much as you say, then you have to trust that they are going to make a decision that's good for everyone and not allow that to happen here. But that's something they have to choose. And you need to admit that this isn't something you can make happen and hold this place in a fishbowl forever unchanged. And the chief says, it would have been easier for you to just lie to me. But if you had promised me exactly what I asked, I would have known you were unworthy of our help. So then comes the big moment where they all go into their ships and they get on the ocean. The canoes stopped. To the men of the crew, it looked just like any other part of the sea. Chief Kaizen took out a long whalebone trumpet and placed the bell underwater. Then he blew into it, and the trumpet produced a surprisingly loud sound that could be felt through the hull of the canoes. The music was like whale song, mournful and majestic. A few of the Aduans in the other canoes began to beat the surface of the water with their oars in rhythmic accompaniment. Just as the sun peeked over the eastern horizon, a great black shadow, shaped like the sleek shell shuttle favored by gone weavers, rose out of the water a mile to the east, arced across the rising sun, and fell back into the water. A moment later, the thunderous boom of the breaching creature reached the men in the canoes. It was a Krubin, the great one-horned, scaled whale of Dara and sovereign of the seas, 200 feet long and as large next to an elephant as an elephant would be next to a mouse. Its eyes were so dark that they sucked in all sunlight like deep wells, and when the great fish exhaled through its blowhole, the fountain shot as high as 100 feet. More Krubins breached nearer to the canoes. 1, 2, 5, 10. The canoes rocked, and the Aoduans struggled to keep them from tipping over. "I'm guessing our ferry has arrived," said Moon Kukri, and Defiro realized that his own jaw had been hanging open without his notice. Because it would, wouldn't it? I'm fascinated by the idea of scaled whales. That's a cool idea. The Aoduans believed that the Krubans were as intelligent as men, but their long lives passed in the limitless ocean rather than on tiny dots of land had almost nothing in common with men. They had their own civilization, as sophisticated as any Tiro state, but their concerns were foreign to mankind's minds and their sensibilities alien to mankind's hearts. The inhabitants of Dara, awed by the Krubans' physical presence, only admired them from afar, but the men of Tanadu had learned to speak to them, after a fashion, over 100 generations. The Aoduans asked the Krubans to perform a small favor for their guest, this Kuni-Garu. The great fish considered the request and assented. They sought no reward. What could men give them? They needed nothing. They would do this for their own amusement. I love this. This is so cool. So these fucking whales have their own whole civilization that's like just as complex as man's, but their shit is just so far removed that there's no reason for them to get involved in our shit, no reason for us to get involved in theirs. I love the fact that, like, because I'm covering Deep Wizardry, which is a book set in the 80s about two, like, kid wizards who wind up having to team up with a bunch of whales to do some magic, and some of the whales have a grudge against these humans because their water has been so polluted, and so their like whole habitats in places have been so ruined. But there's no baggage like that here because this civilization hasn't done that to the oceans here. So there's just this mutual sort of like respect that's happening, and willingness to work together just because. There's no, like, you know, that's just really wild. So Defiro, they put fucking, like, saddles on the backs of these cute Krubans. Defiro gets into his saddle, and then he's, like, feeling real affectionate about this guy who he's made friends with, Huluwen, and gives him his sword as, like, a goodbye gift. And Huluwen gives him the war club. And it's just like this really touching moment that I was like, oh, Defiro. I'm going to call you Biter, said Daff. Sure, it wasn't an impressive illusion from classical Anno, but at that moment, Defiro Miro felt every inch a hero from the old tales. Which, yeah, you're riding a whale, carrying a club. You should. You deserve to feel that way. So then comes the surreal as hell journey to the Pan Palace. Before him, jutting into the sky like a bowsprit of a great warship, was a 20-foot-long horn. It was so thick at the base that two men together could not have wrapped their arms around it. The tip of the horn was sharper than the point of a spear, threatening destruction to anything that stood in its way. That's so crazy. Meanwhile, Kuni is on the saddle behind him and, like, holding on to him for dear life, but also having the fucking time of his life. "Aren't you glad you came with me, lad?" he shouted when he saw that Defiro was looking back. Defiro nodded and bit his tongue again to be sure he was not dreaming. They were riding on the back of a Kruban, and around and behind them 20 other Krubans swam along. Duke Guru's force was sailing up the Amu Strait on the backs of the sovereigns of the sea. They moved faster than any ship, than any airship, than any creation of mankind. As the great Kruban fleet approached the Amu Strait, the riders raised the red flags of Kakru charged with double ravens. To the patrolling Imperial fleet, what they saw was a scene out of myths, legends, descriptions of mirages. The great Kruban was the symbol of the princeps or the emperor, and yet Kakru soldiers were riding them. It was impossible. It could not happen. One of the Imperial ships was slow to get out of the way, and a Kruban decided to ram it with its horn. The ship's solid ironwood hull and oaken masts snapped like twigs stepped on by a giant, and men were thrown into the air as the ship under their feet exploded into a million pieces of splinter and wreckage. I wish that they had like destroyed a lot more ships than just that one, but that's still very satisfying. So they disembark on shore. The Crewbins beach themselves so they can get off and then just leave. I don't know what I thought they were going to do, but just dropping them off and leaving was not it, I promise. But I like that because, you know, why should they get more involved? They did their thing. The men of Rui stood mute at the sight of Crewbins ferrying Kakru soldiers. No one had ever heard of people riding on Crewbins, much less seen it with their own eyes. Surely this meant that the gods were on the side of the rebels. Oh, didn't occur to me. We've come a long way, said Luinzia, a smile on his face. Just a little farther, said Kunis, smiling back. They set down their weapons as Duke Guru walked solemnly down the streets. Then the 500 ascended into the air in 10 great airships and winged their way back toward the big island to Pan. This is crazy. So they fucking just head to Pan. Of course, everybody sees that, like, oh, okay, there's these ships coming and they're probably going to provide reinforcements, whatever, like to the Battle at Wolf's Paw. They descend towards the palace, and the palace guards look at the ships and are like, yeah, that's our side, whatever, we don't need to worry about this. Probably Irishi just feels like riding in an airship. Who knows? And I love this moment. Leave 20 men with me, Luan said. We will guard one of the airships. If you don't succeed in an hour, fight your way back and we'll retreat. Do you always plan for failure even when success is within reach? Kuni asked. It's a prudent thing to do. If you hadn't thought of the possibility of failure, I wonder if your attempt to assassinate Mapidere might have worked out differently. Because you thought of escaping to Zudi, you did not want to burden your flying machine with too much weight. You could have carried bigger bombs or flown lower before launching them. Sometimes prudence is not a virtue. I gambled a lot when I was younger. I can tell you that Tazu is more fun than Lutho. If you're going to gamble, you have more fun if you don't hold anything back. So Luan's like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. You're right. Let's go. And they fucking go up there, crash through, and just get right to fucking Irishi. Like, no problem. I couldn't believe how easy this was. Nobody's expecting it. Of course it's easy. Like, why would you know? And I love that DeFiro is sticking next to the Duke really close, both because he was charged with protecting him, but also DeFiro knows that everybody else is going to try and protect the Duke, so being next to him is also a very safe place to be, which I'm like, amen. And then they get through the doors, they get Irishi, and this is the part that made me fucking crack up. I can't. An old man stood at the foot of the bed wearing an expression that was a mixture of pity and triumph. He turned around to face the men who had burst through the door. I am Prime Minister Goran Pira. Now if you will put down your weapons and listen. DeFiro bashed in his skull with one strike from Biter. He had no time to waste on anyone who stood in the way of his prize. He was going to get his hands on the boy emperor. Oh my god, that's so fucking gratifying, you guys. I knew, because I said that, you know, what is he going to say? Oh, I was working for you all the whole time. Shut up. No. And yeah, even here, DeFiro's like, all right, I'm going to get this kid. I'm going to do it. And he's like, I won't be made a king, I'm sure, but I'll get something out of it. But Kuni is too fast for him and gets around him and gets the kid himself. And I love DeFiro just being like, God damn it. Well, I should have known I couldn't win against him because Kuni's just fucking clever. So what are you going to do? And I like that he's not like bitter about it or anything. And he's not even ambitious. He's not like, I want to be king. He's just like, well, I could get something, whatever. The boy was so frightened he could not speak. The entire room fell silent. Then everyone heard the sound of water trickling against the marble floor. Emperor Irishi had let his bladder go. The guards dropped their swords. And that is the end of the chapter. Holy shit. There's half a book to go. I have no idea where shit goes from here at all. None. No idea. I'm so excited, you guys. This is super fun. So yeah, thank you very much, Kyle, for commissioning this book. This has just been a blast. I've had so much fun reading this. I really have. So I'm excited to see what happens next. I have no idea what to expect. Capturing Irishi, I would have thought would be like the finale, you know? So no idea what's going on. And I have to wrap this up because I have another one coming up, but thank you for bearing with me because I started off a little bit late. And I hope that everybody has been enjoying my coverage of this. I want more people to read this. It's just so good. And I just can't imagine what happens next. So thank you all so, so much. And I will be seeing you soon, hopefully, with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.